Hello friends, today we're here to talk about the Human Trafficking Task Force here in our community. It is marking 10 years. We're joined with Tifanie and Tess. Thanks for joining us, ladies.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Now Tess, why don't you start off and just kind of give us the why we needed something like this in our community.
It was back in 2010 when I learned that human trafficking wasn't just something that happened in third world countries, but it was something that happened in communities all across America, and I was appalled. So the next 2 years I was in grad school, but I knew during that time that God was calling me to do something to combat human trafficking. So when I completed the master's program, I started looking around the community to find out what was being done to see how I could get plugged in, and there was nothing being done. So I spent a year putting the pieces together based on a template from the Office of Victims of Crime, the federal agency. They have a template on trafficking task forces. So I used that to put the pieces together and build the framework to start South Dakota's West River Human Trafficking Task Force, and we had our first meeting in January of 2014.
I guess just kind of talk me through a little bit what types of work and what types of things the task force does.
So our task force is housed under the Pennington County Sheriff's Office, and within that we bring together both justice system partners and what we call the social services agencies, the ones that are maybe serving the victims directly through support or navigation, things like that. Within the structure of the task force, we then also have committees to really focus on the key areas of combating the issue of trafficking. So we have the Law and Justice Committee that helps track cases, pull together system-based partners, work with community-based partners to get services in place. We have the Law and Policy Committee that really watches legislation, helps not only introduce or carry legislation, but can also provide testimony to support legislative action that addresses this particular issue. A large committee that we have is the Education and Outreach Committee. Obviously, we want people to know that this exists, right? We want people to understand what they can do and their role in helping keep other people safe, whether it's children or adults. And so everybody can kind of figure out where they can plug into.
Now Tess, you've been involved in this kind of awareness for a long time. I guess maybe just talk a little bit about your experience with that time and maybe something that you gathered, over the years.
Well, human trafficking in South Dakota, from what we've seen, and I've been working with survivors for 10, 11 years, and as the director of Freedom's Journey, we work with survivors. Most of the people we've worked with were trafficked as children by their families. Initially, there is other types of trafficking, more gang-related and, or cartel-related or something like that. But most of it is from people that are supposed to be in positions of trust. So when we do awareness and prevention, we like to reach out to family members and we like to reach out to kids. And we've spoken to YFS. I know we have our awareness committee speaks to high school and middle school students quite a bit. But we do as much community outreach as we can because we know that a community that's aware, informed, and paying attention is a community where it's harder for trafficking to happen and people are more likely to come forward to get help. Or to let law enforcement know if they think something wrong is going on. We want to inform parents, especially in the community, to keep the communication lines open with their children, to have dialogue that's helpful in helping the kids keep themselves safe since we can't be with them 24/7. We can't monitor them all the time, but we really like to work together to promote the family cohesiveness and safety.
And then we also have the Native American Tribal Committee that helps ensure that we are serving our Indigenous relatives in a good way.
And now we're chatting with Allison, the MMIP coordinator here in Rapid City. So Allison, thanks for joining us, and just tell us a little bit about the work that you do.
Yeah, so my position was created specifically for Native American cases here in South Dakota to bring attention to the Native cases, the missing person numbers, the homicides here in South Dakota, and then also bringing education to South Dakota for this specific topic.
Sure, because when we're talking about the Human Trafficking Task Force, it's sort of in the same vein as the missing and murdered Indigenous people.
It is, yep. And then my coworker Mary Beth, she is the human trafficking coordinator for South Dakota. We work hand in hand together just because of the vulnerability aspect of it. So my role that I play in the human trafficking and the vulnerability piece is I like to be the liaison between the law enforcement and the community or the victims' families. I'm trying to create is the better communication between tribal, federal, and state law enforcement. So,
and I guess maybe if folks want, like updates on these kind of cases, or is there anything on social media or like a website people could go to?
yeah, so there's a South Dakota Clearinghouse website that we have through the Attorney General's office that is updated through NCIC, and so that's specifically law enforcement based. If they have any questions about my position, a specific case, or they don't know who to contact for anything to do with missing persons, or they have a loved one who's been murdered and they want updates and they're not able to get in contact with state's attorney or the victim services, feel free to contact me and then I can try to get them in contact with the right person. So.
And now we're back with the West River Human Trafficking Task Force and more on their efforts within the last 10 years.
And we also have to think about the climate in South Dakota with serving the populations that we do in the rural communities. We have to understand that there are risk factors that are elevated in our state, such as socioeconomic status, communities of color serving our 9 tribal nations in the state. Those elements we have to be more aware of how those communities are more impacted, because exploitation becomes easier when there's a vulnerability at play, when individuals either do not have the resources, do not have access to resources, don't have supports, they're isolated. All of those factors are just to look a little bit different in the landscape here in South Dakota.
One of the things that is really big that our task force awareness and prevention committee does is ahead of the rally every year. Every year our task force has had a team of people, experts and volunteers going throughout the hills ahead of the rally, and they hit hundreds and hundreds of businesses with awareness information, handouts, labeled lip balms with the trafficking hotline number, and short trainings if they're open, and then information on if they'd like more training. But the hospitality industry, especially in western South Dakota where tourism is such a big part of our communities, it's important that we hit that as well in a big way.
I oversee the Child Advocacy Center, so we provide forensic interviews for children, some of who are trafficking victims, as a support to the justice system, so ages 3 to 18. For our youth, we're seeing solicitation online, we're seeing the manipulation or the use of drug paraphernalia in luring children and young adults, young teens into this kind of victimization. But we also see the familial trafficking, people they know that they were supposed to be able to trust, being exploited because of a need, whether that be substance misuse or socioeconomic status related. Children are some of our most vulnerable, and so our work at Children's Home Society is really to address whatever issue comes forward in the terms of keeping children safe. Get involved, pay attention to the behaviors. Children are less likely to verbalize that something's going on. Their behaviors are going to tell us a story. Even if it's not your children, we encourage you being a positive support and role model in the lives of the children around you. Check in with them, ask questions, see how things are going. Please monitor what's happening online. Ask questions, stay curious, and really be mindful of it's not the environment, it's not the world that we were raised in. The landscape has changed so much, and we have to be willing to put in the work to learn what our children have access to, their friends, other people in the community. And while we always want to assume that people have good intents, we also have to stay curious about why people might be interested in having connections with our children or talking to our children. So it's really about being involved and intervening if you see something, right? Taking that next step to make that call. Right? I would rather make the call and be wrong than to have not made a call and have missed something. And even if it makes me uncomfortable to make that call, it's what needs to happen. So when we talk about making the call, it's calling law enforcement, calling child protection, getting the system involved. They're the ones that can truly take action and intervene on behalf of those in need. And then we can bring alongside agencies that are meant to help jumpstart the healing process.
And in addition to that, we always like to add that we do not encourage people to intervene on their own, because if it is a trafficking situation, you will almost certainly be placing the victim in more danger, and you may even be placing yourself in danger, which is why we always encourage the phone call to law enforcement or to child protection services. And something really important that I learned from Tifanie a few years ago is that when people are going through trauma and when children are going through difficult situations, just having even one safe, competent, caring adult on their side and in their corner can be game-changing. And we can all do that with the young people in our own lives, in our families, and in our communities. And that's one way we can really help foster a safer place for these children to grow in. One of the most important and impressive things about our task force is how all these agencies, whether they're law enforcement, direct service providers, other professionals, ministry association, healthcare, they all work well together, where we all have a piece of how we intersect, how our mission intersects with possible trafficking, and we hand off where that's where that's appropriate, and work well together. We get referrals from each other, we get expert advice from each other, and that's a big part of helping to foster a community where trafficking is less likely to happen. I will say, as far as prevention, a couple years ago I spoke at a youth camp in the hills, and hundreds of young people, and after that camp the leadership contacted me and said we had over a dozen young people who their youth leaders contacted their local law enforcement when they got home because of things that were that they didn't know were risky online that were happening, and people had contacted them, and so they talked to their youth leaders, and the youth leaders helped them contact law enforcement with their parents.
Wow.
So that awareness is so important.
That's powerful. Yeah. Just being vigilant, really.
And just reminding ourselves that just like any other type of victimization, it doesn't know a zip code, it doesn't care about your status in the community, and that it doesn't all look the same. Not every experience will be a clear indication that something was happening. The more involved and connected we are to other human beings, the better chance we have to intervene sooner.
And to understand that it's not just young females who are victimized in this. The ages can be very young, and we've worked with survivors who were trafficked up into their 50s, and it's male and female. So it's, the public awareness that we get the idea that it's young females is not accurate. I mean, yes, they are, but they're not the only ones.
Sure.
January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and January 11th is Blue Campaigns Wear Blue Day, and with the Red X for awareness. And we do also have our Freedom Expo in January. That'll be January 20th, where we bring local community experts who are on the field, on the ground, combating trafficking, and it's free and open to the public.
Okay, now if folks want more information about the task force, or maybe Freedom's Journey, or kind of more information or more awareness piece, where can they go?
Yeah, so we have a website out there. We also find us on Facebook, and then we can link up from there.
And all of our members' organizations, I believe, have links on the task force website.
Okay.
So people can contact any of the member organizations through that website.
Okay. All right, ladies. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.